She broke into millions of pieces when Jason asked her to be a surrogate for him and his young girlfriend. It wasn't until recently that she started seeing his true colors, but now she knew how terrible he really was. She cried for hours over it, and all she wanted was to hurt him again. She said no, of course. It wasn't long before his new girlfriend became pregnant, but he finally learned the lesson just months later. Upon receiving the call from Jason that evening, she wasn't sure what to expect. Her heart was in her throat as she answered the phone. "Hi," she said, uncertainty evident in her voice. "Lily, Victoria's water has just broken. Would you be able to come to the hospital?" With emotion thick in his voice, he said, "I need you now." The man she'd loved for so long always held a special place in Lily's heart. She couldn't say no. How could she? She immediately rushed to the maternity ward upon arriving at the hospital. Although Jason had broken her heart and wrecked her confidence over the last few years, she was still there to support him. The day she gave birth to their son, Justin, she still remembered how nervous he was. First thing she did was speak to a nurse. "I'm here to meet Jason and Victoria Riley," she said. She was taken to their room. As Victoria lay in a hospital bed, tears streamed down her cheeks. The doctors said she had 3 centimeters left before she would be wheeled to the delivery room, Jason informed her. He was sweating profusely on his forehead. A supportive hand was placed on his shoulder by Lily to soothe him. After everything he had done, she hated being there to help him. The contractions worsened for Victoria as she screamed and sobbed. Lily felt sorry for her. When her son was born, she remembered how painful it was. A doctor walked in just then as the door swung open. Putting gloves over his hands, he said, "Let's see how far you've come looking away." Lily gave the young woman some privacy. Then she noticed something. As Jason looked at his girlfriend, he had a worried yet loving expression on his face. In a moment, Lily's heart sank. She had never been looked at like that before. She wondered for years whether he even cared about her. She realized how unfair it was at that moment. There was a growing sense of fury in her. "All right, time to go," the doctor informed them. Fortunately for Lily, Jason's life was about to change forever. When Lily Riley married her first husband, Jason, she always imagined a happy ending. Just out of college, she met Jason in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they immediately fell in love. Several months later, they were married, and it was a wedding to remember. As far as Lily was concerned, they would be together forever. Lily's pride and joy was her son Justin, whom they had together in their 30s. Despite having a wonderful relationship with her son, Jason was much more distant from him. She didn't pay much attention to it. Compared to her, Jason was much less emotional. Her husband's behavior changed as their son grew older. A family-splitting event. Jason became more distant and quiet as the years passed. The lack of her husband's presence never made sense to Lily. Whenever she tried to discuss it with him, he just shrugged and walked away. While this broke Lily's heart, she ignored it due to her busy schedule as a mother. Until the day he left, he told her, "I found someone new and she makes me happy." The day Jason walked out on his family was one of the worst days of Lily's life. She couldn't believe that her husband of 25 years was gone, but she knew she'd have to stay strong for her son. It took a few months, but eventually she learned how to deal with the pain. But one day, when she ran into her husband and his new girlfriend, her entire world came crashing down around her. When she saw the woman he had left her for, her stomach dropped. She never knew that her husband liked women half his age. Victoria was gorgeous with her long brown hair and freckled skin. She was tall and athletic, and Lily knew she would never be able to compare with a girl like Victoria. That day, she went home and cried for hours. But the worst was yet to come. It was 5 years after their divorce that she received a call from 51-year-old Jason that she would never forget. That day, Lily had just gotten off the phone with her son, who was enjoying his first day at college. When she saw Jason's name flash across her screen, she already knew that something was up. She answered reluctantly, but she had no idea what was coming. "Hey Lily, how's it going?" he asked casually. Lily frowned to herself. She knew something was up. "I'm fine. What's going on?" she asked, desperate to get straight to it. Jason made some small talk for a while Lily only grew more anxious. "Look, is there a reason why you called me?" she asked, her stomach twisting into a tight knot. That was when he asked a question she would never forget. "I just wanted to ask you something," Jason said casually. His casual tone calmed her nerves a little. But that's when he asked something she never expected. "Victoria and I want to have a child, but she's recently had some work done, and she's in really good shape. We don't want to ruin that. You always said you wanted to become a surrogate. We were wondering if you would carry the child for us." The second those words left Jason's mouth, Lily's world came crashing down around her. How on earth could he ask her something like that? She stood speechless for a while. "Lily," she heard Jason's voice. She snapped out of her haze, and that was when the anger began bubbling within her. "What did you just ask me?" she said through gritted teeth. Lily was in a state of shock. Jason never cared about the stress that childbirth had on her body, but there he was, asking her to preserve his 24-year-old girlfriend's perfect body. She tried to bite her tongue, but she couldn't help but yell into the phone about how selfish his request was. "No, I will not be a surrogate for you," and that woman, she yelled and hung up the phone. She was livid, but little did she know that soon, karma would have its way with Jason. For days, Lily sat around, furious that he could even ask something like that. Who did he think he was? He broke her heart 5 years ago, and now he was asking her to do something so physically exhausting for the woman he left her for. She hadn't heard from him for a few weeks, but her son delivered some interesting news one day. Victoria was pregnant with their first child. Lily couldn't help the tears that burned behind her eyes. It was hard to accept that her husband had moved on so quickly. After the divorce, she remained single and focused on herself and her son. For those 9 months, she barely spoke to Jason. She felt like he had betrayed her in the worst way possible. But one night, she received a call. That evening, when she received the call from Jason, she didn't know what to expect. She answered the phone, her heart in her throat. "Hello," she said, uncertainty obvious in her voice. "Lily, Victoria's water just broke. Could you come to the hospital? I need you right now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Lily had always had a soft spot for the man she loved for so many years. How could she have said no? As soon as she stepped into their hospital room, she spotted Jason. Victoria sat in a hospital bed, tears streaming down her face. "They said she only has 3 centimeters left. Then they'll wheel her off to the delivery room," Jason said. His forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. Lily placed a supportive hand on his shoulder to soothe him. She hated that she was there, helping him after everything he did. Lily's heart was pounding in her chest. She felt strange being around the man who had hurt her so much recently. She saw the way he looked at Victoria. He had love in his eyes, something she never saw when he looked at her. This was one of the happiest days of his life, but it was one of the worst days of her life. But soon, the day would take a devastating turn. For years, she wondered if he even ever cared about her. She was always left to take care of their son by herself while he locked himself in his office. It was at that moment that she realized how unfair it truly was. She was becoming furious. "Okay, it's time to go," the doctor said in a cheery tone. Luckily for Lily, Jason's entire life was about to be turned upside down. The doctor allowed both Jason and Lily to go into the delivery room with Victoria. Lily felt for the young woman as she fought for her life to give birth to their first child. Jason stood before her, a proud smile on his face, while Lily held her hand. The room was filled with the sound of Victoria groaning and asking for help, but suddenly they could hear a baby crying. But when Lily looked at Jason, she noticed the look on his face. Jason's face was twisted in horror as he looked down at his newborn child. Lily was confused. She quickly walked toward him and glanced down at the newborn. But at first, she couldn't tell what was wrong. Jason glanced at Victoria and then back at the baby. "Honey," he started, but that night was about to take a chaotic turn. Victoria, out of breath and covered in sweat, stared at the shocked expression on Jason's face. That was when he said the words Lily least expected. "Why does the baby look just like your ex-boyfriend?" he asked, a chill running down Lily's spine. When she saw the regretful expression on Victoria's face, she knew she had to get out of there. Lily left the delivery room and made her way back to the waiting room. As she walked down the hall, she could hear Jason's booming voice. He and Victoria were arguing, and she was certain she knew why. She couldn't believe what had just happened. It appeared that the baby did not belong to Jason. She could only imagine how terrible he felt. She sat in that waiting room for what felt like hours. Eventually, she watched as a man showed up and walked toward the nurses beside her. "Hi, I'm here to meet my child. The mother is Victoria Jones," he said. Lily couldn't believe her ears. At that moment, she noticed Jason walking down the hall, his face red and puffy. The other man walked past Jason, barely acknowledging him as he headed for Victoria's room. Jason walked toward Lily and sat beside her. "I am so sorry," Jason, Lily said. Victoria had been cheating on him for years. "It's okay. It's for the best, you know. I've been thinking." Jason paused and wiped the tears from his cheeks. "I've been thinking that it's time for me to come home," he said. Lily waited for him to burst out laughing, but he didn't. He was being serious. She stared at Jason with wide eyes. "Come on, baby. Let's go home," he said, and tossed an arm over her shoulders. She quickly shook it off her body, her face twisted in disbelief. She couldn't help but laugh in his face. "You must be mad. I'd never crawl back to you. You got what you deserved," she said, and got up from her seat. He called after her as she walked down the hall, and she couldn't help but laugh as she walked away. Finally, she won.